Welcome you to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees public hearings, and we are going to have tonight public hearings regarding the 2015 permanent appropriations and also a public hearing regarding a joint request for bids for the collection of solid waste. So, and today is March 24th, and it's 5:29. Mr. Burning, can you do the roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. McFarland. Mr. Burning?
Present.
Mr. Honolaw?
Present.
Ms. McFarland?
Present.
All the trustees are present.
We'd like to start first, as we said, with the 2015 permanent appropriations. I'd like to turn the present meeting over to Mr. Hennenkamp. If you can give us an overview of what the 2015 permanent budget appropriation looks like.
Happy to do so, Ms. McFarland.
Thank you.
Quick PowerPoint just to kind of go through what we're going to do quickly tonight is just go through what the budget cycle is for Springfield Township, pretty much all townships in the state of Ohio. Quick overview of our temporary appropriations. That's the measure that was approved by the board in the actually at the end of 2014 at our final December meeting. Highlight just some of the changes that have existed or were being proposed from temporary to our permanent, and then just a quick overview of our 5-year projections for our 3 major funds, our general fund, our police district, and our fire district, and how some of these changes, not so much as changes, but just how this year's appropriations affect our long range, and then just a quick final analysis and comments, and then we'll open it up to public comments. The process, this actually is sort of the culmination of the budget cycle, this meeting, and the action taken by the board tonight will sort of finalize what happens in our 2015 budget, and really after tonight we sort of start the process, believe it or not, for 16. But in July of each year, that's the July month is when we go through our first part of the budget process, and that's when the board approves the budget. That budget includes actual revenues and expenditures for the 2 previous years, and then actuals for the first half of the current year that you're in. And then it also includes estimates of revenues and expenditures for the second half of whatever that current year would be, and then also the following year is what you're projecting. That is then sent, after approved by the Board of Trustees, that's sent to the County Budget Commission. They conduct public hearings and ultimately certify what has been submitted to them, and then that comes back to the board. In October, based on that certification, the board will then go through a resolution step that authorizes what is called the necessary taxes and certify that back to the county auditor. In January, or by January 1st of each year, the board then has to pass temporary appropriations, and those temporary appropriations are what allows the township to begin to operate into that new year. They're temporary only in the sense that they're not final, because that's what we're going through at this step. The permanent can be exactly the same as temporary, or there can be alterations based on what you've learned in the first 2 or 3 months. Generally, we don't see a lot of change between our temporary and our permanent, and that's pretty much the case tonight. I think in some of the earlier budget years where we were uncertain about certain things or revenues, or we were dealing with more of a crisis situation, you saw more fluctuation, but not a big bunch of change tonight. So taking a look at our 2015 appropriations that we did, our temporaries that we did back at the end of 2014, there really was very little difference from 2014. The total 2014 appropriations at $22.9 million. The proposal the start in our temporary was 23.5, and you can see in some cases, like for instance our general fund actually at that time was slightly less than it was in the previous year. Slight increases in police, fire, infrastructure was pretty much dead on. There was probably a very minimal fluctuation between the two, and about half of our infrastructure dollars came from grants through the SCIP processes. We pretty much matched 2 for 1. One thing I would remind, these are appropriations, these are not expenditures, so this is the maximum amount that can be expended. The other thing that oftentimes throws things off when you're talking about appropriations and you're looking at a $23.5 million is the law requires us to record everything. So these are, before monies can be spent, they must be appropriated. So there's oftentimes where you're receiving grants in, you're recording that. Even though those dollars actually never touch our books, they're never deposited in our accounts, you have to, they're called recording dollars. For instance, in SCIP, we never possess those dollars. They're never sitting in our account. Those are just paid for by the state when we have a SCIP project. But by law, through the process, we have to show those as though they are dollars. Same thing with community development, and a lot of grant monies actually are never deposited in our account. So that sometimes can be confusing, and it's also very, very difficult sometimes to compare one year to the next, because if you had a lot of success in getting grants, it actually might look like, well, wait a minute, your budget, you're talking about being broke, but your budget went up. Well, that can be a result of being very successful with grant dollars, and so they're recording rather than actual dollars. Most of the changes in 2015's appropriation had to do with some health care and workers' comp. In both of these cases, we're self-funded in health care, and while we received a lot of dollars savings in 2014, we still have to appropriate those dollars because you're budgeting for potential claims. So that's why it shows up as some of the increase right now. We obviously haven't realized those expenditures and won't know until the end of the year. We did do some staffing increases in 2015. This is, to get us back to where we were at some pre-2009 and 10 levels, to get back up in police, fire, and in our senior center. We've also put some money aside for our CIC residential incentive grant program. We've done some facility capital improvements, equipment, and then there's an increase in comp center fees paid by police and fire. That all of those things account for that kind of total of $600,000 of difference between the last 2 years. There were also some things that in December, at the end of January, or I'm sorry, the end of December, that we did not put in our temporary appropriations, despite the fact that there were requests from the department head, and despite the fact that both I and I think the board recognized they were probably needed. We just didn't have the fund. There was some staffing requests by the service department that we did not appropriate any dollars for. There was about $290,000 worth of equipment in the service department that we didn't purchase, but we well know that this is needed equipment eventually. We just didn't feel comfortable that we had the cushion in that area. It was about $75,000 that generally we've tried to do one township-related resurfacing project, not using our road district to do a micro overlay on a particular street. We eliminated that, and we didn't budget anything for salt in our temporary, with the idea that we knew we had enough salt to get us through this winter, and that was a decision we basically intentionally postponed until this meeting, until we had a better idea how much salt we're going to need. So those were things that were in the budget, early requests that were intentionally left out by the board in the decision-making process. Kind of summarizing what the changes are now in the permanent from what we did in December, the general fund is increased by a little bit more. This says $500,000, or roughly $500,000. It's right around that $500,000, about $150,000 for land, and we are budgeting $343,000 for salt. And that's in anticipation of what we think the price is going to be, and in the unfortunate month of February that we had that utilized just about all of our salt reserves. On February 1st, we thought maybe we would get off the hook and maybe only have to buy a very little amount of salt. Unfortunately, the last 3 weeks we used close to 2,700 tons, and we now are down to about 700. So we're looking at having to almost fully replace the quantities in our dome if we want to go into a full complement for next year. Obviously, we don't know what the price of salt is. I don't think we have any indication that it's going to be cheaper than last year, given the winter that we've had and the rest of the country's had. So we're budgeting for right around $100 a ton, which may be low. I mean, we've seen as much as $125, $140 per ton that some jurisdictions had to pay for in 2014. The other increase deals with some equipment This is mainly a recording issue because of some equipment we have to buy. This is some snow plow equipment to finalize the equipping of a salt truck that we're buying. CDBG, that's Community Development Block Grant. In December, we knew we had made our application. We just hadn't received any word on our success. Since that point, we have been notified that we'll receive $203,000 on block grant money this year. Some to fund things that have typically been funded, and some for some well-needed road projects up in the Seven Hills area. Again, CDBG, that's all grant money. It's very restricted, and it can only be used in certain neighborhoods that meet income level requirements. In the police district, there's about $25,000 of equipment. This is to equip some of the new cruisers that we purchased. Every year we purchase about 5 new cruisers, and this is just doing the light bars and the interior packages that go with that. In the first part of 2015, we've had a high amount of repairs to fleet in the fire, so they've almost depleted their fund for the entire 2015 that was budgeted. It's a bit of an anomaly, but it happens from time to time, so we're putting an additional $20,000 in that fund available. And then the DART fund, and this is primarily a grant fund almost exclusively. These aren't necessarily township tax dollars, but there's about $4,000 of cash that they have from seizures that they want to be able to appropriate so that they can utilize those funds. There's a couple of additional items under the general fund that deal with some recreational expense, about $6,000, and the other one was
$6,000 of police for gate, and then $2,000 for
some repairs
in park
for facilities for parks. So, but this covers generally the change. And as we said, not a lot of changes proposed. The big one, lion's share of the dollar amount is salt, which we knew we were going to have to make that decision on. So that's kind of the change. I think just in a quick summary of where we look, if we look at our 5-year projections on our major funds, sort of starting with the general fund, the summary of issues we want to really touch about. Obviously, we've seen over the last 7 or 8 years a big reduction in some of our revenue streams, either because it was eliminated or significantly reduced. We've been able to replenish some of that with the passage of the JEDS issue. The big issue, I think, for the future, and this has been an issue for a number of years, and sometimes it gets worse than others, but it's the biggest in those last 2 bullets, the sort of impact, the operational impacts of our service department. Their revenues just stay flat. They don't increase really, and haven't increased in any kind of significant way at all over the last probably 10 years. And so you have costs that creep up just because of salaries, because of insurance, because of equipment, because of materials, and there's no opportunity from the funds that they have able to utilize. They sort of remain flat. And so that demand and impact on the general fund continues to increase. We do use our general fund to augment and assist with where we can infrastructure projects, and you have an increasing demand in infrastructure. So those are sort of the big issues that face the general fund. The JEDS impact, we talked a little bit about this at the state of Ohio, but just again to give kind of an example of, this is the cup that represented all the revenues that the general fund did receive back in 2007. That was about $3.7 million. After all of the cuts that we talked about and the elimination of certain funds, we lost about 52%. So a little bit more than half of that cup was emptied for us. These are revenues we no longer receive. These are dollars that were generated locally that the state decided to retain. The JEDS is impacting that. And again, this is a projection because obviously we haven't received these monies because it hasn't been in effect for a full year yet. But based on what we've received so far and projecting that out, we're pretty confident that's going to make up about 31% of the loss. And that's about right what we targeted. That's about what we thought it would do. This is the area that, we still are short from where we were 7, 8 years ago. And those are the ways the way we're making that up is a variety of different ways. There's things that we've done to consolidate. We've eliminated some programs. We've eliminated staff. We've consolidated and there's still going to need to be some additional work, but, you know, this is sort of what's left to be dealt with, and then the infrastructure from the general fund. If we look at the general fund sort of from a projection standpoint, and I got to caution that, you know, the general fund always sort of looks like this. It's one of these funds that, you know, in previous years, the next year always looks a little gloomy. We're in better shape than we have been in most because of some of the practices that we've employed over the last 5 or 7 years to build up our carryovers. But this crossing point really shows sort of, you know, where the critical point was, and you'd say, well, you know, sometime around 17 is where you're going to need to do something. This is based on current revenues, or sort of minimal revenues, guaranteed revenues. Generally, our revenues will come in slightly better than what we project. We estimate fairly conservatively. And this also factors in that we would be meeting 100% of appropriations, which we never do. We're probably in the 80 to 82% on any given year on appropriations. So there'll be greater carryover, but this is sort of looking as if we spent everything we appropriated and revenues came in exactly as a minimum level of what we can anticipate. This is the picture. And I think the idea here is to sort of represent, you know, this is a fund that continues to be a concern. This is with the jets. So without it, you know, you'd be looking at a crisis situation. The history, being here for 20 years and looking at this, I'm not alarmed. It's an issue that we're going to have to deal with 3 to 5 years and continue to be diligent and be creative and find solutions to it. I know the colors aren't showing up real well on this, especially with the light on, but this is the revenue, and obviously at some point you can't deficit spend in a township. That's why it becomes flat, because that's when your revenues, you know, you're not going to negative spend, and you're not able to do that. But you can see our projections are that revenue, or that expenditures aren't really going to, you know, they're relatively flat. And the reason you see that dropping is you're spending your, you know, you're spending your carryovers each year. And so, you know, eventually you're out of your savings. This is about the forecasted revenue level. So this becomes the gap that has to be dealt with. If we look at our police district, the police district's in about as good a shape right now as I can ever remember in most cases. This projection here is showing that, you know, the existing levy would pretty much, the useful level of the levy would expire sometime after the 2018 year. Historically, again, for the same reasons, we're projecting revenues that are certified amounts by the county auditor, and we're showing 100% of appropriations being spent. We know we don't do that. We historically never have. I have full confidence that this will push at least another year as a minimum, and so in words, this will be off the sheet. So in the next 5 years, I feel pretty confident that barring some unforeseen circumstance, we won't be in the need of doing anything levy-wise for a police levy of any kind of thing. So this is the fire EMS district. Pretty much the exact same situation. The big difference here and why you're seeing this big drop in their revenue stream is that there is one mill that was passed in 2011. It was a 5-year levy, so it took effect in 12. And we did that as a 5-year levy. All of the entire millage for police is continuing, meaning it stays on forever. All of the fire levy stays on forever except for that one mill. So there will be an expiration of one mill, which means a loss of about $500,000. That, coupled with their typical expenditures of carryover monies, you know, sort of expedites the expiration of the useful life of that levy. If you were to simply put that levy back on in 2018, 17, most likely 17, and just keep it probably puts them in the same situation as police. So it wouldn't be a tax increase, but it would be renewing that mill, which I've shown it. I can't guarantee that would happen because it would have to be approved by the voters. So we're showing what happens if it doesn't and the need for that. I guess, again, to recap, there's not a lot of change from where we were in 2014, which was a pretty, I want to call it pretty basic, not a lot of unusual things in that budget. Obviously, the winter season impacted us and has pretty severely in the last 2 years. We talked about the service department and the impact there. There's a little concern over some of the equipment needs that aren't being funded in this budget just because the dollars aren't there. Those needs are there, and not doing it just prolongs the fact that we're going to have to do more later. The infrastructure continues to be something we're going to have to work on. The JEDs, I think, is something we want to continue to look at. Right now, it's projecting a little above what we anticipated. If it were to continue on that pace, it may allow for us later in the year to feel more comfortable doing some of these equipment needs or some of these other supplemental needs that might arise that we're not funding now. I think for the future, the big question, the big amount of work and the questions have to do with levy consolidation. Is there advantages to taking our police and fire levies and consolidating them and possibly trying to get legislation which allows some operational aspects of that to be included for other departments? And the advantages are simply the leverage you might gain over, having these funds being separated, where you can, have higher fund balances and allow you to a little more fluctuability in any given year. With some of the changes in the elimination of the rollback and homestead, I'm not sure that's going to have the effect. We had at one time had hoped that there would be the possibility to actually reduce the tax rate by consolidating them into one levy. While that would look like a giant levy, you would say, well, here's all the millage that's there now. Can we drop that 2 mills, still generate, because it would be new millage, can we generate, a higher amount because property values have stabilized? Something we'll look at. I think that's what we need to study, for the rest of this year and early 16, but that's probably a decision you're going to want to make in 16, leading up to the need to make a decision on that fire levy. That's the one where I think you have to sort of decide whether you're simply going to continue that 1 mill, or do you want to do something more drastic and try to consolidate all of them, and what are the advantages? The other is, of course, the infrastructure funding, and we know what a tough issue that is, and how we go about that, what potential solutions are there. There's not many, unfortunately. We know the only way we can raise revenue right now in any significant way is property tax, and that's certainly not a popular way to do it. No tax is, but that one's not popular because of how high it is already. But we'll brainstorm all kinds of different solutions and look at assessments and all the different things and try to put together a plan that deals with it, because it must be dealt with in some way or fashion. So, I don't know if the board has any questions, but that kind of gives you a quick overview on this year's permanent appropriations.
Well, when I think about our service department, and as many of you all may know, I rode with our service department with the last big snow that we had. And one of our trucks had broken down, so we had to take a backup truck. And that backup truck with salt on it had difficulty even getting up a hill. And so it was almost like you were hearing, what's the story? I know I can, I know I can, I know we can do this, I know we can do this. And we chugged, and I thought we were going to stop and back up in the middle of the hill. But, we need to look at equipment that we have really pushed to the bare minimum, and look at how we can improve some of like that truck that we need, for the service department. But I'm very impressed with how the staff is working together, the leaders, trying to minimize expenses as much as possible so that we could look at, continue to be a conservative board as we always have as far as spending money. Do you have any?
Gwen, yeah, I don't have any real questions on this. This is something that basically as a board we're constantly looking at throughout the year. It's just an ongoing process. And I would say that it's because of the resourcefulness and the frugalness of our department heads that we're able, year after year, they'll get a budget and they'll come back and they'll say, well, we're going to cut this out. We're going to, sometimes they say we have to have more money. We can't fill the shifts. We need to be able to have enough employees to have paramedics, there when they get the call that there's a medical emergency, for example. But by the same token, they're good police, fire service always in trying to do more with less. And so a lot of the credit goes to the department heads and staff for the approach we take.
Okay. Now we have an opportunity for questions or comments from the public. Yes, ma'am. And I would ask if you could step to the podium and over there and just share with us what your name is and your address, and then also request that the audience abstain from any discussion so that we can hear the question or the concerns that are being shared with us this evening.
Okay, you were going so fast. About the fifth slide in, my name Catherine Brockfield, sorry. About the fifth slide in, you had CIC/incentive. What does that mean?
The CIC incentive grant, Community Improvement Corporation, we formed last year when the JEDS was passed. The board made the decision that we would create something known as a residential incentive grant program. This grant program allows for township residents who work in Springfield Township and, of course, live in Springfield Township to apply for a residential grant in the same amount of the tax that they have paid as a result of the JEDS. So we have to fund that. So what it amounts to is there is an amount in the budget that allows this board to transfer money to the CIC for that program to be funded. So that's an increase different than what we would have had last year because we didn't have that program.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Any other questions?
I have none.
Okay. Okay. Later, after our second hearing, we're going to have a resolution that addresses the permanent appropriations, and it will be Resolution 19-2015. But now I'd like to adjourn from this meeting so that we can move into our next meeting, which will be joint request for bids for the collection of solid waste. So I need a motion to adjourn this public hearing.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
Okay.
You're actually not adjourning the meeting, you're just closing the
We're
public hearing.
closing the
Closing
public
the
hearing
public,
and
okay.
moving down to the second public hearing. And I'd like now to call to order the Springfield Township Board of Trustees public hearing regarding the proposed joint request for bids for the collection of solid waste. Roll call, Mr. Burning.
Yes, Ms. McFarland. Mr. Burning? Present. Mr. Harlow?
Present.
Ms. McFarland?
Present.
All are present.
Now, we're going to hear from our administrative assistant, Mr. Gilbert. He's going to talk about the process regarding the solid waste joint request for proposal and for the RFP and the bid specifications.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. This evening, as you mentioned, we have been in discussions with Hamilton County Solid Waste in regards to putting out a joint request for proposal from solid waste haulers to bid on the services of providing solid waste or garbage and recycling collection for township residents. As you see here, the three communities that are going in together with this joint request for proposal, obviously, is us, Colerain Township, and Ross Township in Butler County. There are many other townships in Hamilton County that are interested in pursuing this, but in terms of geographical areas that made the most sense for communities to join together for this proposal and gave us the best opportunity to receive favorable pricing, it was Colerain, us, and Ross Township, being that we are contiguous, that made the most sense, and the proximity to Rumpke, obviously, assuming Rumpke bids favorably, would make the most sense. The Ohio Revised Code 505.27 authorizes or allows townships to enter into a contract with waste haulers to provide this service and be the sole provider of that service within townships. And that's the section of the code that we are using that give us the authority to move forward with this process. Now looking at, as most people are wanting to know, and as we've talked in great lengths about over the past few months, is what are the benefits, what are the negatives, and what would be the timeline of this proposal? The benefits, obviously, or we're hoping the benefits would be, is to provide the community with lower cost garbage and recycling collection. It would provide greater accountability over surcharges and fees. Right now, the waste hauler has sort of carte blanche authority to put any surcharges or any fees they want on your monthly bill. There's no one that has oversight in terms of what they're charging you. By entering into a sole provider contract, we would have the ability within the contract to limit and to eliminate certain surcharges and fees that you're currently being charged. It would potentially increase community recycling because in the bid specifications, as you'll see here shortly, it includes recycling. It isn't an additional option. It's actually included in the base collection service. And then greater accountability to residents, meaning we would have then the authority as your local governmental contractor to go to the provider and ensure that they're abiding by the contract and providing the service that they've indicated they would via the contract. Some of the negatives, to be totally upfront, is that it would prevent and prohibit residents from choosing their own waste hauler. There would be one sole provider that the township would contract with on your behalf, and you would be required to utilize that provider. Residents cannot opt out of that. Discontinuance of special agreements that you may have between your waste hauler and property owners. There may be a certain agreement that you have, but that would go away because there would be one contract for all township residents. And it limits bulk items to once a month, as opposed to now where you may be able to put bulk items out every single week. But the bid specification would limit it to once a month. The timeline that we're looking at is that the RFP would be issued the week of April 6th. The results or the bids would be due May 15th. The contracts would be awarded sometime in August. Therefore, the implementation would be sometime April of 2016. The reason that we're looking at such a long lag time, if the board chooses to award a contract based on the bids, is because certain waste haulers need time to prepare their staff, prepare their equipment to provide a service of a contract of this magnitude. We're talking upwards to almost 40,000 accounts that this would be when you include all three communities. As indicated, there are many other townships that are interested right now. They're just not in a position because of their geographical location, or they're not in a position right now with whatever they have going on in their individual communities to pursue this particular process. But at this point, as mentioned, about 40,000 households with the three communities is what we're looking at for this contract. Yes, Mr. Burns.
There are other townships that are going out to bid for this. They just won't be with us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And they're not doing it currently. I mean, they already have contracts in place. Those entities that don't currently have contracts, they're not putting out a proposed RFP right now at the same time we are, but they may in the future. The current rates, and these are average rates, and they exclude the surcharges and fees. As you can see, right now we're at about $20 a month, $22 including recycling a month for garbage and recycling. That's the average rate that residents are paying. That's pretty typical, as you see, through some of the other townships in the county. Greene and Dell have a slightly lower rate, and Coleraine currently has a slightly lower rate, mainly probably because of their proximity and their relationship with Rumpke. But the expectation is that that rate possibly could be, I'm not even going to speculate, but the idea is obviously that that rate could be lowered through this process and requiring all residents choose the one waste hauler. As mentioned, the base bid that's in the bid specs currently include both garbage and recycling, and that's unlimited garbage, meaning you can put out 5 cans, you can put out 8 cans, you can put out 2 cans. But we're doing unlimited garbage. Yard waste is included in that, and yard waste would be collected in the same manner that it is now. That won't change. That's the way we're writing the bid specs now. The only difference would be that in the bid specs, under the base cost that everyone would have to abide by, not only would it be unlimited garbage and unlimited yard waste, but it's also going to be recycling. And that would be collected on a weekly basis. And each customer, each resident would receive, each household will receive a 64-gallon or 65-gallon cart for recycling versus the small bins you have now. The idea is that both the waste hauler and Hamilton County Solid Waste and frankly the township was trying to encourage additional recycling, which being that we have unlimited yard waste and unlimited garbage, the recycling option and including that in is going to allow for the recycling counts to go up and then frankly may incentivize people to choose one of the discounted options that we're also writing in the bid specs where you can have yard waste, you can have recycling, and then you can have limited garbage collection, which would be to what you can fit into one 96-gallon cart. That will be a rate that will be discounted from the base bid rate. So hypothetically, if the base bid rate comes in at $16 a month, the discounted to one can per week may be $14 a month. We don't know what that price will be, but the idea is that you'll have an unlimited rate, which was the default rate, then you can choose to have the one can rate. Additionally, as mentioned, you'll have one collection a month for bulk item. The garbage collection will be weekly collection. You will be able to get the 96-gallon cart that some of you may have now, or that residents may have now at an additional fee. So while the base rate is unlimited, the actual cart does not come with that. That would be an additional fee. However, if you choose the one can a week discounted option, the cart does come with that option.
It comes free.
Well, it's included in that price.
Included in the price.
Yes.
Yes.
There may be, for an additional fee, backyard service for the disabled. So if you have elderly or disabled individuals that aren't able to get their cart to the curb, there is a service that the waste hauler will provide it for an additional fee that they will come and get the can from the back of your house and bring it out to the curb and then put it back. And again, as mentioned, the recycling is included in that base rate and it's bundled into the cost. And there's no discount for opting out of recycling because that is part of the base collection rate. In addition, as mentioned, the bulk item is once a month. There is backyard service and a private drive service that is available for an additional fee similar to the disabled where they'll actually come down your private drive if you have a fairly long driveway. Or if you're not disabled and you want backyard service, then you'll be able to get that provided to you as well for an additional fee. We're looking at restricting the hours that they'll be able to operate within the neighborhoods between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So if you have waste haulers now that are in your neighborhood at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, the contract will prohibit that, and they will be required to wait until at least 6 a.m. to start collecting. The waste hauler will bill all residents in a quarterly fashion. So the waste hauler will bill residents directly. This is unlike some of the other contracts that you see throughout the county in that a lot of municipalities pay this on behalf of the residents out of the general fund, or they have a particular tax levy associated with this and the waste hauler bills them directly. With us, because we have really no mechanism in place to bill residents for this service, the waste hauler will bill residents directly, similar as you get bills now. Per the township resolution that will come after the selection of the waste hauler and enter into the contract, each household unit will be required to pay the base fee, as mentioned, which will include the garbage, recycling, and yard waste, and the one bulk item per month. The hauler may assess late fees on delinquent accounts. The waste hauler will be able to discontinue service after a 90-day delinquency, and they may require a reactivation fee, which is all similar, I'm assuming, to what you currently have in an individual contract now. And then the contractor, as mentioned, is responsible for all the collections. There are some exemptions, and keep in mind that because we have two other communities involved, there are certain exemptions and certain situations that apply to their townships that may not apply to another, which is with working farms. Obviously, Ross Township has many more working farms than we do here in Springfield. Therefore, they want an exemption for the working farms that working farms may be able to opt out of this process because they have other means to dispose of waste. Similarly, mixed-use owner-occupied properties may be able to opt out, meaning if there's a residence that also has a business associated with it and they have a dumpster, but they also live there, they may be able to opt out because they have an individual agreement for a dumpster service for their property. And also, we are limiting it to single-family residences, which includes individually owned condo developments, as well as multifamily or apartment dwellings of 4 units or less. So when it says 5 or more units attached, that means they're exempted, they're out. Only 4 units or less or single-family or condos are included into the actual bid. The base fee is fixed. The only other charges will be the actual fuel cost adjustment, which will be included in the specs. So there's a formula by which that the waste hauler can provide for increases in fuel, but the beauty is in the specs it also includes for a decrease as well. So if fuel goes down, then the fuel surcharge goes down, whereas now they never reduce your price for that. They always increase you. The beauty is we'll be able to do it both ways in the contract. The contract is for 5 years. This will be a 5-year contract, and as stated, the proposed start date is April of 2016, and the contractor will require protocols for missed pickup calls, so they will be required to go back and get that. Any spills, snow delays, holidays, any complaint resolutions, or employee misconduct will be able to work on your behalf to ensure that those issues are remedied. Acceptable recyclables, I think this is all commonplace information that you know what is included in recyclables, but it's pretty self-explanatory. That isn't going to change from what you're currently being provided now if you do have a recycling service. And as mentioned, and I think Hamilton County Solid Waste would attest that the benefits of the recycling are obviously to conserve energy and save natural resources, possibly create jobs, and it provides some stock to industries that actually use and manufacture equipment or create products with recyclable materials. So with that concludes the proposed request for proposals, and if there's any questions of the board, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'd like to note that Holly with Hamilton County Solid Waste is here in attendance, so if there's any questions that we can't answer up here, she may be able to answer, and I'm sure there may be some of those. So.
One thing that I want everyone to understand is we have not agreed to any kind of contract with anybody to do this. At this point, all we're doing is seeing what our options are. And I say that because I'm not 100% sure that we will or won't do it. I'm not 100% sure Coleraine will or won't do it. And if they pulled out or we pulled out, that might change the price for the other party and so forth and so on. So this is just an exploratory thing. If we can't get our residents significant savings, we're not going to switch to this to save, 50 cents or $1 a month or something like that, because it just doesn't make sense. So we're going to look at it. We're going to see what they come back with. We're getting numbers from all over the state when they've done this. There's numbers that are really low, and then there's numbers that aren't as low. So we have no idea what the bids are going to come in at. So until we know that, we will not make a decision. And again, it's going to have to be significant for us to make some sort of a change.
And Mr. Bernie, I would add, that's a good point, that there are different prices that come on all over the state, and I think Holly would attest to this, that you can't read too much into those numbers, because a waste hauler may bid on a particular program for a myriad of different reasons. And some communities in the north, there are some waste haulers that are bidding on programs that simply are just to put other ones out of business, so they're lowballing those bids. There are other areas where they may not fear that they have really that much competition, so you see the bids higher. You can't predict what your bid's going to be based on what you see another community get, because there's a lot of reasons behind what that particular bid was and why it was priced the way it is.
Mr. Honeywell, do you have a comment?
Well, the only thing is, we've had, as a board, we've had an opportunity to review this, to study the request for proposal. And the purpose of this meeting is to hear from you, the public, and to get your comments and feedback. I know I did have some discussions after the State of the Township meeting here this past week with, I know one of our residents who's here and had some thoughts regarding this. So, I would be, unless Gwen, you have other things. We'd like to hear from what the public's thinking.
Right, it's really critical that we get feedback from you. From my perspective, as Mr. Burning indicated, if If this is an opportunity that's going to save our residents, then I'm all for it. But if it's something that's just going to be a nickel or dime or 50 cents or a dollar, it's not really worth it. And then also, once we finally complete all the research, we will make a final decision from there, pending all of the other communities are still going to be in. If they're not in and opt out, then we will do the same thing.
Well, actually, the way the bid specs are written, if one community opts out, the waste hauler's not required to honor the bids. The bid is for all three communities. If one community opts out, the waste hauler can decide not to honor any of those. In fact, the community, I think, will be precluded from proceeding with the bid. You'd have to rebid it.
Well, if Ross
for individual
Township
community.
pulls out, I doubt if the bid will change, but if Colerain pulled out, then
Right.
obviously the
They
bid
have a
will change.
larger
Right.
service. So now we'd like to hear from the audience. Any thoughts that you may have, any comments, please, again, I request that you step to the podium and share your thoughts and concerns with us. And again, request that the audience abstain from any discussion so that we can give our fullest attention to the individual at the podium. Thank you.
My name is Bob Brockfield, and I live in Finneytown,
What's your address, Bob?
750 Reynard.
Thank you.
It's exciting to think about these options. I'm excited, for example, to think about recycling more. Right now, I use one of those little cartons that you mentioned. But I also think about public health. I would sure like to see the bulk items cleaned up instead of collecting rats somewhere. And I would sure like to see yard waste handled. For example, composting. I think about in the past, didn't we pick up leaves and things like that? We're not able to do that anymore. And we might bring something like that back into the thing. But you have the whole waste stream to deal with, and you get a professional company like Rumpke who'd be willing to work with us, give us some ideas. And it's just very exciting to me. Thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
And
One gentleman in the back first, and then Joe, we'll do you next, and then the gentleman, yes.
My name's John Ewald, 8645 Zenith Court. First of all, I want to say the gas program you guys put together has been beneficial for many residents in the community. And this trash program, same thing. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. A lot of the questions I had were answered in your presentation. You did a great job on it. About fees, they have to be controlled. Before I came up tonight, I pulled a copy of my bill out. I am charged for service and fuel charge only. If they start adding on a lot of administration fees and all this surcharges, it's going to take the bite out of this thing. We want to keep it nice. But I guess my biggest question is I saw in recycling, we currently receive money from Hamilton County for recycling. And there's an opportunity for this to increase through the thing that was on the website, 20,000 plus. My question is, where's that money go? What funds it go into? And my other question is, on the recycling program and on this trash program, what's in it for the township? Do you guys, does the township, do we as a township receive funds from for putting these contracts into place?
No, the only thing that the township would benefit from is the waste that the recycling that you talked about. If there's more recycling, then the township will get a little bit more money for that, correct?
What happens is, as a percentage of the recycling that the community has, so example, right now, we're at about 9%. So of all the garbage that's created, 9% of that is recycling that individuals are doing, from a tonnage standpoint. The township, based on a formula from Hamilton County Solid Waste, gets a portion of that back to be used for recycling products, so products that were made with recycled goods, whether that be a park bench, park equipment, any type of material that's recyclable goods, or as you see out here, the community recycling dumpsters that we have, those are paid for. We ask guys to pay Rumpke to have those and pick them up and utilize them. Those are paid for by recycling dollars that come back to the community. So that's what the money is used for. It goes into a recycling fund, and it can only be used for recycled products or recycling services such as the waste dumpsters that you actually see right behind our buildings.
And I agree with you.
Events, cleanup days, things like that.
And that's what I wanted, just a point I guess I was trying to make. There's going to be an increase, tentative increase. It's, everything's ballpark of additional monies. And it would be nice to see, and I agree with this gentleman about putting a different program in, like for composting,
Right.
to address additional issues with trash. But I think it's beneficial for the community.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you. Mr. Gorman?
Joe Gorman, 8824 Falmouth Drive. I like the idea of this, like another aggregate type of situation where we would have an opportunity to reduce some costs. I know my Rumpke bill, I get charged the fuel surcharge, and they told me that they can't change it. It keeps on either going up or whatever. And I'm also charged, I believe, for my recycling bin. I got one of the big cans, and we found that we probably 90% of our waste is recycled in our house. So we would like to see this program, if there's a way, Chris, to really promote recycling over the waste. And we also do a lot of composting at my house. So how do you think this program will incentivize people to recycle?
Well, I think Holly would tell you that those communities that have a contract versus subscription, which we're currently what they refer to as subscription. Those communities that actually move away from subscription and go to contract, they see anywhere from a 30 to 40% recycling rate, whereas right now we're at about 9%.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out who else besides Rumpke is out there right now providing this waste collection.
The two other waste haulers that we think have the capacity to handle a contract of this size is Best Way and Republic. Now, there may be others, but those are the ones we see typically, or that Solid Waste sees typically bid on a communities of this size.
But geographically, with our 3 townships, say, talking about this, are we actually trying to put the squeeze on Rumpke on this?
Nope. They're free to bid just like
No,
any
but
other
if we
waste hauler.
just if we only sent it to Rumpke, then they would just give us the same price we already have.
Right, so competition.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. The gentleman, oh, yes, could you please step to the podium?
Good evening. My name is Gregory Cox, COX. I live at 9093 Cherry Blossom Lane. First, I'd like to thank everybody for actually pursuing this and going after and doing a lot of research into it. Some of the questions I've had have already been asked, so I'm not going to ask them again. I guess one of the questions that I did have was on the recycling, because what I have found through my research is that a lot of the companies, in fact, do make quite a bit of money on recycling metal, glass, paper, and that is a very high value item. So I guess my question is that within the contract, and part of the question was already asked by this gentleman right there on the recycling, was the feedback to Springfield Township in terms of, do we have within the contract an effective manner to really understand how much is being collected? Weight-wise, pound-wise, ton-wise, would that be built into the contract so we had a good idea of what kind of
Yes, we actually-
tonnage would be going in?
That's a good question.
Yes, we actually know it now. Without the contract, we know how much, as I mentioned, we're at about 9% now. That's reported by the waste haulers in our community. We know how much is being recycled as a percentage of total waste tonnage that's being taken out of the township.
So we have a good number then,
Yes.
is what you're telling me.
Yes.
So we would know, whether or not we're really getting a good return coming
Absolutely.
back to, okay. The other question I was going to ask, which was asked by you too, was how many haulers are there? You said there was 2 besides Rumpke that was being considered. Would you open it up to other bidders, or are these just the ones that,
It's open up to all bidders.
okay,
We just gave you the ones we think might bid on the contract.
understood. Okay, thank you. I understand that. And the other question I had was on the $20 that you had in there, that's currently what we're paying on
The average.
average?
It wasn't, it was 25,
Yeah, I think it was around
$3.
20.
23? Oh, for recycling.
23.29 with
Yes.
recycling, without 20.79. That's the average of the
Yes.
township. Everyone doesn't pay the exact same amount.
Okay, so would we still be charged for the recycling?
No, there would be a specific
So it'd be
amount.
another
The
way
recycling
around.
would be
Built in.
included and everybody would be able to participate. So you couldn't say, I don't want to, if you don't want to recycle, you still have to pay the same as everyone else.
Okay,
That's how you entice people to recycle.
okay, so we don't know yet what the actual monthly amount would be until we get the bids. Okay, understood. Okay. The final question that I had was that, is this just residential within the township, or does this include businesses?
Just residential.
Just residential. Okay. Would it make any difference whether we included businesses or not?
Our understanding is it's very difficult to try and bring businesses into this just because of all the differing needs they have. It's not something that works well, with aggregation, which is kind of the same thing with our energy aggregation. It's residential in nature primarily.
Okay, so this would just be
Commercial,
residential.
industrial would be excluded.
Yeah, I was just curious because a lot of businesses have bulk pallets and stuff like that that's,
They may have a
we don't
pickup
really
every
consider
day.
that garbage.
Right.
That's more,
Yeah,
Some
they
have
have
oil
pickups
pickup, some have
every day.
oil pickup, some
Yeah.
have, Kroger's has a big compactor.
Yeah.
Because they have so much, so
And other ones
everyone's different.
Have every daily pickups as well.
So you can't really just clump them into one ball like you can
Okay.
residential.
I was curious about that. That was really all the questions that I have. I really do appreciate all the efforts that went into digging into this and taking a look at it. I'm pretty sure that took a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox. Yes, the lady in the back, yes, you, and then Robin. And we're just,
Hi, I'm Roseanne Pekulski. I'm at 8364 Jadwin Street down in Valleydale. And I guess I just need a little clarification. First thought is like, I'm kind of losing my choice of being able to choose, who I want to provide a service for me. Kind of just up there. Second of all, okay, we can put out as many trash cans as we want.
yes.
Do we have to buy their trash cans to put out as many cans
No,
as we
you
want?
do not. No, you do not.
My other question, and I kind of caught this, is this a subscriber service, or I thought I heard it mentioned that they would bill the households? So do people have an option who don't get their garbage picked up now? They won't pay? What does that mean?
Well, your question was,
My question is, I have neighbors who don't use Rumpke. They get rid of their trash however they get rid of it. But it had said that the company who won the bid would bill the households.
okay,
So do you have an option not for them to pick up your trash?
no.
No,
So
don't
you
have
are
that.
obligated to pay for trash pickup because you live in Springfield Township?
Correct. There are rare exceptions, as I mentioned. Some individuals may be excluded based on their specific circumstances. If they have an opportunity, for example, that they're required to, or they have the ability to dispose of their waste at their particular employer for whatever reason, and they can provide documentation and verification of that, they may be able to be excluded, but no. All individuals will be required all households will be required to participate, and there will not be any opportunity to opt out.
So if I would decide, I have a place where I work has a dumpster. I want to take my garbage there, I don't want to be part of it. That could be an exemption then, as long as I'm,
Yes, it
Yes,
would require
yes.
documentation and authorization from your employer to justify that in the form of an affidavit. You're not just going to
Sure.
say that.
Sure.
It would have to be
But,
documented.
I remember looking down my street tonight, tomorrow's garbage day. It's just spotted with the houses that have trash out weekly. But those homes will be obligated to get a bill for something they're probably not going to use.
Unless it's determined, my understanding, that wherever they're placing their garbage, and this is for sanitary reasons as well, there has to be some justification and validation that you are taking your garbage to another place.
Well, I have a question. I think one of the slides, and Chris, maybe I'll direct this towards you. One of the slides here says that if you don't pay for 90 days, they can kick you out of the program.
That's true.
Would that be one way that somebody doesn't want it, they don't pay, and then it says contractor may discontinue service after
There it is.
90-day delinquency.
True.
But
But
that means you're not paying a bill.
Right, it's
That
not,
means you're not- that
I'm not
means
saying
you're-
it's a great way,
individuals that
but-
don't currently have garbage collection, that's a rare exception. Most people have some company that's collecting their garbage. If not, I'm curious to know what they're doing with their household waste.
They're taking it to work.
Again, and if they have that situation, they may be able to be excluded, assuming that they can provide verification that their employer is allowing them to do that.
Sure. I
And ju-
work with people who bring their trash to my
No,
job.
they won't be required to participate.
And we agree with you that everything about this is not, perfect. Anytime you try to do something, there's going to be pros and cons. Until we have a price, we don't know if the pros for most of the township will outweigh the cons for the lesser amount of the township. So that's why we're looking at it. We haven't signed up for anything.
Sure, and that's kind of a question I have too. It sounds like that the trustees will make this decision, and I'm just wondering, I got an email yesterday afternoon stating about this meeting today at 5:30. And so kind of my question is too, how do my neighbors find out about this? Is this something that's just going to be done and you're going to get a notice that X, Y, and Z is now collecting your garbage, this is how much it's going to cost, pick up your can, or, I mean, it's out there, I mean, look how many people are here and think
Right,
the number in the township. How
For those
do
in-
they,
Well,
For
if
those
I can-
individuals that
if I
don't
can-
have an email, is there,
Let me.
well, but what if they don't have a
Let me address
computer?
that, if I can address that. We used to have township newsletters we sent out to all registered voters. The meeting we had before this tonight was over our permanent appropriations, and I don't know if you were here to see that or not, but we suffered about a 52% reduction in our general fund, which was the fund that we used to send out those newsletters, and it was one of the things that got cut. We had to give it up. It was great. It was a great way to get out information to everyone, but we just said, that's got to go. We can't do it anymore. And you're right, it's hard in local governments like ours to get the word out to everyone, because a lot of people are just busy. They're not looking at our website. We encourage them to, and we certainly, anybody can sign up, and you'll receive emails at no cost from the township, notices of anything like this we're sending out. But it is hard to get the word out today, and it's expensive.
sure, and I know I pass a lot of the information on to my elderly neighbors who don't even know how to
And the word
have a
of mouth
computer,
is
have
real
one.
critical.
Yeah.
yes.
The other thing is, any resident is welcome to come to our meeting the
sure.
second Tuesday of each month between now and when, I don't know how quick the RFP comes back, but you could come the second Tuesday, they can come the second Tuesday, and we have a public forum every month, so.
It's kind of sounding like it's going to be decided by May or whatever, when they close and you make a decision.
That's when the bid will come in.
And so then the question is, when this is decided, say you're going with a company, then how does the township find out about it? Is it going to be the company's responsibility to send a notice saying, we are now your trash collector, and you
It
will pay
wouldn't
this
start
fee?
until 2016.
So it'll be them. So residents in Springfield Township will be getting this notice, maybe some of them for the first time, stating, this is it. You're part of it. I mean, I just
That's
wanted to
pretty-
bring that
pretty
out. And I
much
won't
that
take
would
up
be-
any more time, but
Okay.
the whole thing, I'm taking a breath going, I don't have a choice. But you get over it, but that's still sticking. And I think when the people come to the day that they get a letter saying, you're paying for this trash, I think that's when people start speaking up. I don't think they come looking for this. I'm glad I did tonight. It's been very informative.
What I'd like to, as well, is for individuals, if they have questions about this waste program, then they can call the township as well. I don't want people waiting until the second Tuesday of each month. So if they have any questions or concerns, feel free to call us at the 522-1410 number.
Sure.
and we will respond to those questions.
Well, and I guess the other issue too is, so you're locked into this for 5 years. What if I don't like my service? What if a lot of people don't like the service? What if someone undercut it saying, oh, we can do it, we'll get it done? And it's not what we've been used to.
Well, there was a slide before, somewhere where
It
it
was
said if
really
there was.
hard to see that too.
Okay, there was a slide that, Chris, that you
Possible
put
for
up, if
me.
there was any concerns regarding the service or the quality of service. Where was that? Oh, here.
We can go through it.
Performance-
Complaint,
Performance
resolution,
terms,
perform-
yeah, if they're
Right.
not meeting the performance, then obviously those can be breach of contract.
Right.
Reasons for ending the contract, if it's like any contract, if they're not performing, there's gonna be performance requirements.
And really, so if we're locking into 5 years, are we locking into 5 years of the cost of the monthly service fee?
That's my
Correct.
It will be
understanding.
locked in.
Yes.
So after a year, it won't be readjusted, going, oh gee, we
No.
should have, okay.
No.
Well, I won't take up any more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, and then there were hands up behind her. Okay.
Robin Hindley, 6341 Ridgefield Drive, Finneytown. When you first talked about doing this, I went back and pulled some bills, and I explained to Mike I had misspoke at one meeting. I do pay single can service. I pay 4 times a year. From February of 2010 up to the most recent one in February of 2015, it went from $49.50 a quarter up to $52.65 a quarter. There's a 90-cent regulatory cost charge that disappeared this year, and I don't remember why, but I think it's something that went off the books. The fuel surcharge has been as low as $4.40 and as high as $10.50, and that's not included in that. If my math is right, and you're saying a $20 average, I'm going to end up paying $8 more a month for garbage than I pay now for single can. Now, I've had Rumpke for 16 years, minus 2 years, when I worked for CSI Republic Services, and the only reason I dropped it was because it was a freebie because I worked for them. And they've missed my can once in 16 years, and that was in December. And I don't know what the reason, I don't know if it was because of the street, they didn't see it or what, but they came right out and got it. I'm all for saving money, but my question is, if you're going to do this, and all complaints are coming to you, Chris, is that a good use of your time?
Let me just clarify something. You indicated that you will, based on what you've seen, you'll pay $8 more a month. Those numbers we put up there are numbers on the average people are paying now. That's not what we're expecting the bid to be.
But is that single can service?
No, that's unlimited.
Okay, because see, I've got
We will
single.
have an option in the bid specs that allows people to choose single can service,
Okay.
which is a discounted option from the base bid price.
Okay.
And we don't know what either of those will be at this point.
I knew there were average numbers, but I don't need the big service. I mean, it's just me. Half the
Right.
time I have a half a can.
Right.
I don't recycle, frankly, because I refuse to pay for it. But if they want to provide it as part of it, I'll sort the garbage out and take out separate cans. I don't have any problem with that.
To answer your question regarding my time, and I think the board, that's more a question for them, how they want me to spend my time. I work for them.
Yeah, if you're not billing it, not taking advantage of the cash stream, and there's nothing coming back to you, I'm just saying as tight as your time is with staff, can you take that on? Or are you better spending your time somewhere else?
Well, we're here to do what we can and
Sure.
provide the best service at the lowest rate to our residents. So that means, Chris and all of us will be working to ensure that, this is smooth, it's a smooth and transparent process. And the bottom line, it's going to be a service for our residents. So
Right.
we just make it work.
Yeah, I'm all
You
for
work
it.
hard.
If
Yeah,
the
as long as I-
trustees can save the residents 40% on their
Sure.
garbage
It's worth
bill,
it.
that's what they're looking at. If it doesn't save any money, it's not worth our time or yours. But if they
Sure.
if they can do this and it's all of a sudden, instead of paying $22 or $3, you're paying 14, I mean, it's worth it. They work for the residents, so they're trying to do this for the residents, not for for them or the township itself.
No, if I can save money, I'm all for it, as long as
Right.
it's not offset by using township resources that are tight right now. I think this is a two-way street. Are they going to be robo pickups, or is it going to be manhandle cans?
It'll have to be manhandled because there's no dictation or there's no requirement of property owners to use those automated cans. So,
Okay. So these are just regular toters, they're not set up for
you can
robo
get,
pickup?
you can get the robo pickup can if you want, And if you choose the single can option, such as what you have now, it will be RoboCan, but that'll be included in the price per month. If you want to utilize if you want to utilize non-RoboCan sort of collection, you can in the unlimited.
Well, my disadvantage now is because you're going to switch the parking goes on my side of the street, which means I got to take the RoboCan on the other side of the street. Because they come down nonstop and they just.
No, I take that back. When you say RoboCan, this isn't where the driver never gets out of the truck.
That's what I mean. is
No.
auto pickup.
Get out of
This
the
is
truck.
they'll get out of the truck. They have those
use
cans
whatever
that latch
can you
into
want.
the actual truck.
I'm sorry?
You can use whatever can you want.
Okay, I thought you were talking about automated pickup, because it really works quite neat as long as that truck can keep on moving.
Well, let me clarify. If you choose the single can option, the waste hauler will provide you with the can.
Okay,
But it's not what you're referring to as robo. It's the one where the guy brings it over to the back of the truck, then he clips it on, then it dumps it, and he takes it back.
okay, so essentially the same ways we have now, only
Yes.
we're going to have toters, one for the recycling, one for the
And I
garbage.
think that's important to note. The board has instructed us in this, and I think Holly will test, through this whole process and these many meetings that we've had to develop these bid specifications, the board has instructed us to make the bid is as similar as possible as to what residents have today. We don't want to require them to go with a waste hauler and at the same time drastically change their service. So we tried to make it so that we'll get a respectable bid back that could provide savings, but at the same time not dramatically change their service.
And the only thing I would ask is to make sure that if they're saying they're going to recycle, that they really do. I worked very close with a company that picked up recyclable toters, and all that garbage and the recycling materials went in the same mix.
Robin, just so you know, the reason that she's here from the Hamilton County Waste Disposal, they're the ones that have financed the research that we've done on this, because they really, really want us, our community and all communities, to do more recycling. That's the only reason they got involved and spent their money to try to make this happen. So they will keep.
Yeah. And I'm all for it. I don't have a problem with it. And like I said, I would do it if it's easy enough for me to do. I don't have a problem doing 2 bags out to the driveway and put one there, one here. That's fine.
They'll make sure that they do recycle.
Okay,
We
thanks.
want it definitely to be a win-win for our community, if it
Okay.
works, if we can work it that way.
All right, thanks.
There was another person that,
There's two over
Them in the back said-
that's right there, yes, if she can,
She's
yes,
been
if she
raising
can
her
come
hand up for a
forward,
while.
yes.
My name is Sue Neal, 1110 Eastgate, Dan.
Thanks.
My comments have to do with the requirements on the recycling. I mean, I recycle, I use the small red bin. It would take me a month to fill up the bigger one. And I know there's a lot of older people in the neighborhood that they have a heck of a time with the bigger bins. So having an option for them to have a smaller bin for the recycling, I watch my aunt trying to pull it up her driveway when I'm there, and it's like, me trying to pull shack down, type of thing. So that's the biggest concern I have, is for the older people not being able to use the bigger equipment as efficiently as we'd like to. I mean, I'm the same way. I like the big trash can, but again, it takes me a month. I put one small bag out a week, being a single person. The other thing I had was the 5+ on the residential. I know some people that have the 4-plexes, the old like that are over on Hamilton Avenue and that, where everybody does it individually anyhow, but there are some that I know do it for the whole, like they have a dumpster in the back. Would they still have the option of doing that? Some of the duplexes have done that too, where my son used to live. He lived in a duplex that had a dumpster, and the landlord took care of all the trash, in the rental side. I know we don't have all that many of them in Springfield Township that are that way, but would there be some option for them?
I think in the bid specification, it's going to require all single-family, as well as any buildings with 4 units or less would have to go into this.
So you'd have 4 trash cans sitting back there and 4 recycling rather than one
Yes.
larger one.
I don't, in Springfield Township, I'm not familiar with, first of all, we don't have that many 4 units or less. And those that do, I'm not saying there's not any, but I'm not familiar with those that have dumpsters.
I know where my son used to live, they had a dumpster for a duplex. It was a small dumpster, but it was
Was it in Springfield Township?
I can't remember if he was in the township or if he was in the city, where he lived.
I don't remember seeing many, most of them have single cans.
We'll look into that, though.
And they pay one price for the, building pays the price, but they all have their own cans.
Yeah, well, he paid his own, he didn't have to pay anything for, it was
Right.
part of his rent, but,
Right, it's part of the rent normally.
yeah. That's the only comments I had.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
John Seymour, 854 Ligorio Avenue. I have a simple question for the, if it's not Rumpke that wins the bid, what do the rest of us do with all the Rumpke bins that we've already gotten? Will they be used by the Best Way, or?
We better be able to use them.
That would be a simple mechanical question. The other thing that I did want.
Let's stop on that, because he's shaking his head no.
No.
Well, who owns those, Rumpke or the individual?
It varies.
It
You can rent them for $2 a month, or you can buy them.
Or you can buy them. If you bought it, you're going to be able to keep it.
Right.
If you bought it.
Yeah, if you bought it. If you bought it, you'll be able to keep it. If you
you're
rent
renting
it,
it,
no, obviously.
Yeah, if you're renting it, but then somebody's got to come and collect it.
Rumpke will.
Rumpke will come and collect it.
It's the mechanical question of how that all is going to work, because that's going to be a bit of a mess when it happens that way. What interests me is that you're talking about 40,000 residents in this area, probably which 95% of them are already served by Rumpke. And the question I have is, what does Rumpke get out of this contract that allows them to be cheaper?
Well, I think what you'll find is Rumpke doesn't want to lose 40, if they have 85% of 40,000, they don't want to lose that. So it's worth it to them to maybe take a little less money and keep the business than to let somebody else take that, because the business would be gone, that 85% of those 40,000, gone.
Yeah.
So it'll be competitive bidding, so.
And that's the idea of going to an RFP.
I'm trying to conceive what they would allow them to drop that rate, other than taking it off their bottom line.
They would take it off their bottom line, but if they don't, they lose 30-some thousand people, and their bottom line suffers anyway.
And they don't get, if I was thinking about this, I would want to think of, are there route efficiencies between the various townships that by increasing route efficiencies going across the township boundaries, you'd be able to save a lot of money of the route efficiencies?
Just by aggregation, they'd be able to save money, because they could pick up every house on the street instead of skipping the ones that are using the 15% that are using someone else, they would be picking them up now.
But I live in a location that we're on a dead end, and the dead end is in one community, and the approach street is in a different community, and they picked up at different times, totally. So I'm wondering just how much efficiency they could save, and whether that, if they did an efficiency of routes across the various things, whether they would be able to get a lower bid than they might otherwise, just taking it off the bottom line. That's all I wanted to comment on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a young lady, yes, if you could step to the podium, please.
Thank you for calling me a young lady. My name is Jenny Lohman, 10039 Wind Lake Drive. Some years ago, you came to the neighborhood for a grill out promoting the road levy. And at that time, I had asked about getting recycling in the township. I do pay for the convenience of having that recycling picked up from my home. I do appreciate that they take it from my home, so I don't have to drive it here. I do know that as a teacher that used to teach economics, that economies of scale does save money, and that I have been looking forward to a cheaper bill. When a lot of people are going in on something and you buy in bulk, more often than not, you are going to save money. And I have all confidence in you that you're going to make the decision for all of us that will allow us all to save money and get recycling.
Absolutely.
And I also feel that it is also a public good as we look to the future. Recycling is something that just has to happen, and because we have to save the resources for our kids. And I just feel very strongly about that. I could say, I have never used police service. I have never used fire service. Why do I have to pay for it? Well, I'm glad it's there, and I'm glad I haven't had to use it. And it's paid through my taxes. I don't get a bill for it, but I'm still paying for it. So I want to thank you for looking into this, and I really hope that you can get us going and get us a cheaper price on our waste and recycling. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There was a hand.
Couple.
Well, let me have you go first, and then we'll do, because you both have already been, so we'll do the closest person first. Second.
He's not spoken at all.
Where?
Catherine Brockfield, 750 Reynard, Finneytown. You mentioned something about making park benches out of the recycling. I think that's a great idea. That's a great incentive to recycle, because if you think somebody can make something useful out of it, who does that? Would the people, so in other words, whoever gets the bid would be responsible? Could we check up on, so we know that they're not dumping it into the other garbage, that they're actually doing something with it?
What I mentioned was, through the money that we get back based on the recycling that happens in the community, we utilize those funds to buy equipment sometimes that are made of recyclable materials, such as park benches.
Okay.
There are companies out there that utilize recyclable materials and make products. We buy those from those type of companies. As far as to ensure that the waste hauler is recycling, yes, there are rules, regulations, laws in place to ensure that they are recycling exactly what they say they're recycling.
They also make money off of recycling.
Right,
By selling
yes.
the recycled good, they sell it, so they're definitely not going to throw it in with the garbage that they have to compost.
Right.
Yeah, that really was strange. Okay, so you, with the money that you save, or you have something, you buy recycled things? How did you say that? How do you buy the recycled benches and things?
There's a certain tonnage amount of waste that the township as a whole, produces. All residents, businesses, actually it's just residential. The waste haulers then report back as to how much of that waste was recyclable materials. How much of it was recycled? Based on the percentage of the total tonnage of waste, it could be 8%, it could be 10%, 30%, whatever the number is. Based on the percentage of recyclable that happens, monies come back to the township. We then utilize those monies to then buy products, as I mentioned.
Okay, great. So you have somebody in your thing who does that, right, who's responsible for that?
I think the answer to your question is there's times where we may need, for instance, a picnic table.
Yeah,
We try to use recycled materials and then use the funds, so rather than take that out of our general fund,
okay,
we'll use this restricted fund, which is the recycling dollar fund, anywhere we can to purchase something that we otherwise would have to use general fund money if it's a recyclable. In
great,
some cases, it's even carpet. If we're replacing materials back at our senior center, we'll try to use
great.
recycled materials, because then we can use that fund. So we'll try to use that and utilize that fund as many opportunities as we can.
Great, so if you let us know about that, we feel good about that.
Yes, definitely.
Put this on your website or something.
We'll do that.
The
Thank you.
gentleman that's right there, and I apologize, I didn't see your hand earlier.
My name's Jack Adams, 12081 Cedar Creek in Pleasant Run Farms. I would just like to ask that you go back and review you've got a multi-tier price structure. If, what would be permitted under the unlimited as far as what they will take, what containers you have to use, and how much?
There was a slide on that.
As far as the unlimited, whatever you can fit in a garbage container, that if each individual container doesn't weigh in excess of 40 pounds. So you could put out 8 garbage cans, and whatever you could put in those, assuming each one of those don't weigh more than 40 pounds. You could put out 15 of them. That is, each of them cannot weigh more than 40 pounds.
Must be in a container?
Correct.
Well,
except for yard waste, which can be, bundled up into 4-foot sections if it's limbs or something of that nature, also not exceeding the 40-pound weight limit. And as far as bulk items, that's once a month. That does not have to be in a container. But as far as weekly collection, it would obviously have to be in a container, but that container with the material that's in it cannot exceed 40 pounds, and those containers are unlimited.
So there's no plastic bags you can
well,
put
now
out?
it does say unlimited
It
bag.
could be in a bag, it just
Oh,
can't
you
weigh
can
more
put a
than 40
plastic
pounds.
bag out.
I just said, it can't be loose material, it has to be
Right,
contained.
but it can be it can be in a plastic bag.
Right.
Okay.
That
So
was his question.
I could put out 2 plastic bags.
Absolutely.
You could put out 22 plastic bags.
Yeah.
Or
you put
100. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you have another question.
John Ewald, Zenith Court. Basically, what I wanted to, if anybody thinks Rumpke's going to take it to shorts, you're crazy. Because if you listen to what everybody's talking about, route consolidations, they're going to save money there. And number two, what we've all been talking about, recycling. The recycling percentage is going to go from single digit to 20% almost.
Exactly.
They're making a killing on these recycling products. So that's where we're going to save money. The more people that recycle, that's what's going to make the program better for all of us.
Exactly.
Bottom line.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, if I could say one thing about recycling, that's something that in the township here, a number of years ago, we decided to try. And I know there were some people that said, oh, don't get into it, it's going to be a mess, there'll be people throwing trash out here. You know, we put a bunch of dumpsters here behind the township. And I will say I've been proud that we said, no, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try it. We don't think people act like that, and they haven't. Those things are wildly popular. They fill them up. Every time you come here, usually they're just about full, and Rumpke's taking them all the time, and it's a way to get stuff out of the landfill, and it gets some additional revenue for the township, besides the recycling that happens at the curb, and it's been a good, I think it's just been a good thing for the township, for our community and society overall.
Absolutely.
But
I think I might have been that guy.
who said don't do it?
Don't do it.
Yeah.
We started with one dumpster, and I forget what is out there,
6.
6 now.
We just recently increased the size of them and
Keep
the
it-
frequency by which they're empty.
Increasing because they're used so heavily, so.
And
I s-
there's some other
I see
people
another
that-
hand. Yes.
That's this lady here too.
Okay.
Yeah, John Seymour, 854 Ligorio. Just so nobody walks away with a really bad impression, there's not that much money made by the recycling groups. Recycling is a difficult process, and finding products you could make from recycled materials has been the limiting factor of recycling in the entire history of the recycling movement. But Rumpke, even if it breaks even, what you said a moment ago is the real catch on that. If it doesn't go into the landfill, that's the big plus for somebody like Rumpke, where they are very limited in space, and trying to get more space for a landfill is a huge cost to them, and also a huge time-consuming process for them. So that's where the recycling value is to the Rumpke group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This young lady right here, I think you had your hand up.
I'm Terry Weiler, 6669 Sandalwood in Finneytown. I'm all for this, as long as it's what it is on the level. My parents are in a place where they have to use certain, they have to use a service that the city mandates, and they've kind of gotten screwed a little bit, and they pay, and that's my only concern. I just want to make sure everything's on the level and that we're getting exactly what this is, and that we're not going to be charged more in the long run or mandated by any other things. That's my only concern. I like the recycling. I love the recycling. I think, is there any way to make that a requirement for the houses, like some cities do?
It will be.
They all get a
done.
can.
Take it back.
Everyone will have it.
They all get a can.
They all have to pay for it, whether they use it, so why
Well,
not?
it's in the bill.
Dale, that's my cell phone. Will you please turn it off? Sorry.
One thing I can say about it, though, all the trustees live in Springfield Township.
Yes.
They all have to participate in it. If it's a problem, they'll know it, because they're going to be part of it as well. It's not like our Congress and Senate that exclude themselves from everything they do.
That's exactly correct.
They all will participate, so they'll all
Yes.
know if it's working or not. And believe me, they can voice their opinion if it's not working.
Okay.
For me, it would be wonderful that I don't have to drive over here and
Yes.
put products in
That'd be
here.
nice. Is there any way to make businesses recycle? Because it's so frustrating when I go to, especially any business, but local business, and I sometimes take some of my stuff home and recycle. I know that sounds awful and really weird, but I cannot stand to have all this stuff go into the waste that doesn't need to. Is there any way to make some of the businesses, or all the businesses recycle?
The way the law's written,
No.
no, that law we brought up, I think, applies specifically to residential.
Well, beyond that, we can't make residential recycling. We can make them pay for it, we can make them get a cart, we can't make them put the recyclables in the cart.
Oh, sure.
So how do cities do that? Like Seattle has mandatory, I know I have other friends in cities that are mandatory to recycle.
For businesses?
Well, for businesses and for,
Well, it's a different state.
Because they're a different state and they're a city, not a township as well.
okay, well, that's my questions, thanks.
I have a,
Go ahead.
oh, no, I have a question. Where it said, in one of your slides, you indicated if individuals had disabilities, that the company would come and move their garbage out to the curb and then take care of it. Does Rumpke provide that service now?
I'm
I
sure
don't
they do
think-
for an additional
An
fee, I
additional
don't know.
fee. It is
So
an
this would be,
additional
so if
fee.
it's an additional fee,
Right.
that service now would not be an additional
Yes,
fee
it
with
would.
this
It would
company?
be.
It would.
Oh, it would be, but we could still contract, we could negotiate on what that fee would be.
They'll have to specify what that fee will be.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. I was just thinking of the lady that was sharing how it's difficult, to move the big cans at times.
Right.
So I just want to make sure we could be able to accommodate those individuals with special needs. Yes.
You know, one,
I just want to clarify something. Holly Chrisman with Hamilton County Recycling and Solid Waste District. The backyard service you were mentioning, I
Yes.
just looked in some discussions we had, Chris, and it does say that individuals that meet the criteria for ADA and are heads of households with no other person residing may qualify for backyard service at no additional charge.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly. Yeah.
if I could say one thing, and this kind of goes to my thought process, and I think the process that we as a board are going to have to employ when we evaluate these bids, assuming we get there. And I think everybody needs to realize we're in here with other partners who might be having a meeting like this tonight, and their residents might be saying this thing stinks and we don't want to do it. I don't think so, but there is always the possibility that our partners may not, their boards may not go forward, and this proposal may fall apart. But assuming that it does, it's going to be, I think there's a lot of positive things for our community, but we're going to at the same time have to weigh the financial wherewithal of the winning bidder, to make sure that just because somebody gave us a low price, that we need to, make sure we're not signing up our community for somebody who's not going to be able to deliver. I know there was at one time, Mike and Chris had somebody who was calling, and they wanted to take over all waste hauling for the township. They had no trucks. They wanted the contract first, and then they were going to go out and buy trucks and employ people. And so it'll be very important that we analyze the financial wherewithal and the ability of anybody that does bid on this to actually deliver good service to our community. And so there's a lot of different factors that'll go into this, and we're going to have to carefully weigh all of them to make sure that we're in the end getting a good deal. To the lady who was here that said, and I had another gentleman talk about, the loss of your ability to choose. We take that as, that's important too, and we won't enter into this lightly, and if it's going to be for some, nominal amount, it probably isn't worth it. But if we think there can be real savings, like there has been in our energy aggregation program for the residents over the years, then we will pursue it. And one of the things that got us looking at this is looking at what other jurisdictions pay. And we're paying on the higher end because they can, Rumpke and the other waste haulers can charge what they want. They're really not under competition. The same thing was true with Duke Energy years ago. When they were the only game in town, they got to set their rates, and that's the way it went. When the state legislature passed laws to allow for energy aggregation, all of a sudden there was competition, and guess what happened? Rates started going down as other people entered the market. So we're hoping that works here, but I just want to assure everyone, as a member of the Board of Trustees, we'll be looking at all angles, all options, what makes sense, what doesn't, for the good of the whole community.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think it's important to realize, that's a good point, and as Holly's here, I don't think we mentioned this, but we do have a professional consultant that is developing these bid specifications and that will be conducting the bid meetings and reviewing the bids when they come in. She does this all across the country, and she's being paid by Hamilton County Solid Waste in order to do this, and she's an expert in this field. So it isn't us up here doing it blindly, although we're very involved in the process. We do have a professional working on our behalf to ensure that these bid specifications are correct and that all the providers will abide by them, and that the bids are something that is not only the lowest, but the most responsible bidder as well.
Along with Holly and all the people at
Absolutely.
Hamilton County Waste, Solid
I think
Waste.
when you have that many eyes observing and evaluating and assessing the specs, it has to be a good thing. And as Joe said, the bottom line is we, as your trustees, want to ensure that we are doing the right thing for the residents in the community, including ourselves, of course, because we live here. Okay, any other questions? Okay, next we have our resolutions.
Probably adjourn the public hearing
Oh, okay,
and reconvene the work session.
okay.
Thanks, everybody, for
thank
coming
you.
out and giving your feedback. We do appreciate it.
Right now, then we're going to adjourn the special hearings,
So
and
moved.
then we will go into our work session and pass the resolutions regarding the two public hearing items that we've been discussing tonight. Mr.
I'll second the motion to adjourn the public portion of this hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That part of the meeting is adjourned.
Dan, I would probably call
And I
another
just
roll
wanna-
call, just since we adjourned the work session. I would
Okay.
call roll for reconvening the work session.
Okay, and before, as you all are leaving, we just want to say thank you for coming and attending, and thank you for the questions and the concerns that you raised. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we need to roll call Mr. Burning
Yes.
as we
Mr.
go.
Burning,
Present?
Mr. Honolaw,
Present.
Mrs. McFarland,
Present.
trustees are present.
Okay, we are now going to address the resolutions. The first resolution will be for adopting the permanent appropriations for fiscal year 2015. That's resolution number 19, 2015. Need a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning,
Aye.
Mr. Honolaw,
Aye.
Ms. McFarland. Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
All those, resolution pass?
I need a correction. The resolution's 19, 2015.
1920.
Yeah, and I think I said 20, 2015.
No, you said 19.
Did I say
Said
19?
19, 20, 15.
Okay, just want to make sure. Our next resolution is number 20, 2015, authorizing a joint request for bids with Colerain and Ross Township for the collection, transfer, and disposal of solid waste by an independent contractor, according to our RC Revised Codes 505.27.
So moved.
Seconded?
Mr. Burning,
Aye.
Mr. Honolaw,
Aye.
Ms. McFarland.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Okay. Do you all have anything else?
No.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.